The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness like a bright city made of metal and glass. Ships from all over the galaxy came here to trade and make deals. Some ships looked like giant crystals that sparkled in the starlight. Others were so big they could hold entire cities inside them. The station had docking bays that could fit 100 ships at once. Captain Hyunwoo looked out the window of his ship as they got closer to the station. His ship was called the Persistence, and it looked very different from all the other ships around it. While the other ships were shiny and new, his ship looked old and worn. The metal on the outside was dark and scratched. Some parts looked like they had been fixed many times over the years. "Docking Bay 47 is ready for us," said Haijin from her seat at the communications desk. She was young but very good at her job. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she talked to the station workers. Hyunwoo nodded. "Take us in, Jinho." Jinho was the pilot. He was quiet most of the time, but he could fly the ship better than anyone. His hands moved over the controls like he was playing music. The ship moved slowly and smoothly toward the docking bay. Dr. So-young stood up from her chair and walked over to look out the window. She was the chief engineer and knew everything about how the ship worked. "Look at all those fancy ships," she said with a small smile. "I bet they think we don't belong here." Min Soo, who was in charge of security, laughed quietly. "They always think that. Every time we go somewhere new." Taehyun looked up from his computer screen. He studied alien species and their cultures. "The Nexari have 3 ships here, big ones, and I see at least 5 Valtharian crystal ships. This is going to be interesting." The Persistence moved into the docking bay and settled down with a soft thud. Outside, Hyunwoo could see aliens walking around. Some were tall and thin with blue skin. Others looked like they were made of rocks that moved and talked. There were creatures with too many arms and others that floated in the air without touching the ground. "Should we get ready to go out there?" asked Hyejin. "Yes," said Hyunwoo. "Remember, we're here for the trade summit. We need to show them that humans can do business just as well as anyone else." The crew got ready to leave the ship. They put on their best clothes, which were simple but clean. Hyunwoo wore a dark blue uniform with the Earth symbol on it. The others wore similar clothes. They looked professional but not fancy like some of the other species. When they walked out of their ship, Hyunwoo heard voices talking nearby. The aliens were speaking in their own languages, but his translation device let him understand what they were saying. "Look at that old piece of junk," said a voice. It came from a tall alien with purple skin and 4 arms. This was Zith, who spoke for the Valtharian people. How did such a primitive ship even make it here? Another alien laughed. This one was General Kex from the Nexari. He was big and covered in what looked like metal armor that grew from his skin. The humans think they can play with the real powers of the galaxy. Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. More aliens gathered around to look at the human ship. They pointed at the scratched metal and the simple design. Some of them laughed. Others shook their heads like they felt sorry for the humans. "Their ship doesn't even have quantum shields," said another alien. "And look at those engines, so old and simple." Hyunwoo walked past them with his crew. He kept his face calm and didn't show that he heard what they were saying. So-young walked next to him, and he could see that she was trying not to smile. "Captain," whispered Hyejin, "they're really enjoying themselves." "Let them," said Hyunwoo quietly. "We've been through this before." They walked through the station's main area. It was huge, with a ceiling so high you could barely see it. Aliens from dozens of different worlds were here for the trade summit. Some were buying and selling goods. Others were making deals for mining rights or trading routes. The humans found their assigned meeting room. It was small compared to some of the other rooms, but it was clean and had everything they needed. A holographic display showed information about all the different species at the summit. "The Korgan Empire has the biggest delegation this year," said Taehyun, reading from his tablet. "They're looking to expand their trade routes. The Zenthari are here too. They control most of the banking in this sector." Hyunwoo sat down at the table and looked at his crew. "What do you think? Same as always?" "Same as always," said So-young. "They look at our ship and think we're not worth their time." Jinho nodded. "The docking supervisor asked me 3 times if our ship was safe to leave in the bay, like it might fall apart or something." Minsu crossed his arms. At least they let us dock this time. Remember the trade station at Kepler 7? They wanted us to park outside the main area with the cargo ships. The crew spent the next few hours walking around the station and listening to conversations. Everywhere they went, aliens talked about them. Some were curious about humans, but most just seemed to think they were not important. During the opening ceremony of the Trade Summit, the station manager introduced all the major delegations. When he got to the humans, he paused for a moment. And representing Earth and the human colonies, we have Captain Hyun-woo and his crew from the vessel. The manager looked at his notes. The persistence. Some aliens in the crowd laughed when they heard the name. Others whispered to each other. Hyun-woo stood up and nodded to the crowd. His crew stood with him, all of them looking calm and professional. After the ceremony, General Kex walked up to their table. He was even bigger up close, and his metal armor made clicking sounds when he moved. "Captain Hyun-woo," said the general, "I've been looking at your ship. Very interesting design. Tell me, how old is that vessel?" "Old enough," said Hyun-woo. "I see. And you think you can compete with the major trading powers? Your ship looks like it belongs in a museum, not a trade summit." So Young looked up from her tablet. "Appearances can be misleading, General." Kex laughed, a sound like metal scraping against rock. "Can they? Well, perhaps you'd like to prove that. I challenge your vessel to a standard capability demonstration. 3 days from now. Unless, of course, you're worried about what we might discover." The room got quiet. Other aliens stopped their conversations to listen. This was unusual. Most species didn't challenge each other so directly at trade summits. Hyun-woo looked at his crew. So Young gave him a small nod. Jin-ho shrugged like it didn't matter to him. Hee-jin smiled just a little bit. "We accept," said Hyun-woo. General Kex seemed surprised. He probably expected the humans to back down or make excuses. "Excellent," said the general. "We'll meet at the Kepler graveyard. Standard test for defensive systems, speed, and problem solving. May the best technology win." As Kex walked away, other aliens started talking excitedly. Some were taking bets on what would happen. Most seemed to think the humans would lose badly. Hyun-woo and his crew went back to their ship. Once they were inside, and the doors were closed, So Young finally let herself smile. 3 days, she said. Should be plenty of time. Time for what? Asked Taehyun. Time for them to learn what they're really dealing with, said Hyunwoo. Time for them to understand what a 1,000-year-old human ship can really do. News of the challenge spread through Nexus Prime like fire. Within hours, every alien delegation knew that the humans had agreed to face General Kex in a capability demonstration. Most of them thought the humans were either very brave or very stupid. The Zenthari, who ran most of the galaxy's gambling operations, quickly set up betting pools. The odds were heavily against the humans. Some aliens were betting 1,000 to 1 that the human ship would fail the first test. Captain Hyunwoo walked through the station's main plaza and heard aliens talking everywhere. Some spoke in languages his translator couldn't handle, but he could tell from their voices that they were excited about the upcoming show. They think we're going to crash and burn, said Hyejin as she walked beside him. She had been monitoring communications all morning. I'm picking up messages between ships. They're calling this the human humiliation event. Let them talk, said Hyunwoo. We have work to do. The challenge would take place at the Kepler graveyard, a dangerous area of space where hundreds of ships had been destroyed over the centuries. The graveyard was full of broken metal, floating rocks, and strange gravity fields that could crush a ship in seconds. It was the perfect place to test a vessel's capabilities. Dr. So Young spent most of the first day running checks on the ship's systems. She crawled through maintenance tunnels and opened panels that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. But her instruments showed that everything was working perfectly. How are we looking? Asked Minsu as he helped her with a diagnostic scan. Better than perfect, said So Young. All systems are running at optimal levels. The adaptive plating is responding well. The power core is stable. She paused and ran her hand along a wall panel. Sometimes I forget how amazing this old girl really is. Jinho was busy studying navigation charts of the Kepler graveyard. The area was constantly changing as debris moved around and gravity fields shifted. Most ships had to move very slowly through it to avoid getting destroyed. The last survey was done 6 months ago, he said, looking at his screens. But that doesn't matter much. The graveyard changes every day. Taehyun looked up from his own work. I've been reading about the other ships that we'll be watching. General Kex's ship is called the Iron Fist. It's new and has some of the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The Valtharian ship Crystal Dawn has shields that can stop almost anything. What about our competition? Asked Heejin. Kex is bringing 2 other ships to make it fair, said Taehyun. A Korgan heavy cruiser and a Zenthari science vessel. All of them have crews that think humans are primitive. On the second day, more ships arrived at Nexus Prime. Word had gotten out across several star systems that there would be an unusual demonstration. Species that normally didn't get along came together to watch what they expected to be humanity's failure. The station's bars and restaurants were full of aliens making bets and telling jokes about human technology. Some of the jokes were actually funny, and Hyunwoo's crew found themselves laughing along when they overheard them. I heard one alien say our ship looks like it was built with tools from a scrapyard, said Jin-ho. Well, said So-young, they're not entirely wrong about that. On the third day, it was time for the demonstration. The human crew prepared to leave Nexus Prime along with the other ships. Captain Hyunwoo gathered his crew in the ship's small briefing room before they departed. The room looked simple and old-fashioned compared to the high-tech spaces on other ships. The walls were covered with metal panels that had a dull gray color. The chairs were basic but comfortable. A small screen showed star charts and system information. Everyone ready? Asked Hyunwoo. His crew nodded. They had been together for several years and worked well as a team. Each of them knew their job perfectly. So-young, how's our ship? Asked the captain. The engineer smiled. All systems are green, Captain. Everything is running exactly as it should. Jin-ho navigation. Course plotted and ready. I've got the fastest route to the graveyard. Heejin communications. All channels clear. I'm monitoring the other ship's transmissions. They're still making jokes about us. Taehyun, what should we expect from our audience? About 50 ships will be watching from a safe distance. Most of them just want to see us fail. But some are genuinely curious about human capabilities. And Minsu security? All defensive systems are ready, though I don't think we'll need them today. Hyunwoo looked around at his crew. These people had been through many difficult situations together. They trusted each other completely. Before we go, said the captain, I want to remind everyone of something. This ship is old, very old, but it's not weak. It's not primitive. It's something that no other species in the galaxy has. What's that? Asked Hyejin, even though she probably already knew. Experience, said Hyunwoo. This ship has been flying for 1,000 years. Every system has been tested, improved, and perfected. Every problem that could happen has happened, and we've found solutions. So-young ran her hand along one of the wall panels. As she touched it, the surface seemed to shimmer slightly, like water with light shining on it. The other ships out there are faster and newer, she said. They have bigger guns and stronger shields, but they've never had to survive what we've survived. They've never had to adapt like we've adapted. What do you mean? Asked Taehyun. I mean, said So-young, that while other species throw away their old ships and build new ones every few decades, humans have spent 1,000 years making one ship perfect. Jin-ho nodded. Every time something broke, we didn't just fix it. We made it better. Every time we faced a new problem, we didn't just solve it. We made sure it could never happen again. The aliens think our ship is weak because it looks old, said Minsu. They don't understand that old can mean experienced. Old can mean tested. Old can mean proven. Heejin checked her instruments. The other ships are leaving the station now. Should we follow them? Yes, said Hyunwoo. It's time to show the galaxy what a 1,000-year-old human ship can do. The Persistence left Nexus Prime along with the other vessels. As they flew toward the Kepler graveyard, Heejin monitored the communications between the alien ships. The conversations were full of confidence and laughter. The Nexari think this will be over in the first test, she reported. The Korgans are betting we won't even make it through the asteroid field. The Valtharians are wondering if we'll ask for help when our systems fail. Anyone taking our side? Asked Jin-ho. A few of the smaller species seem curious, said Hyejin. But most think we're about to be embarrassed. As they got closer to the graveyard, the view outside changed. What had been empty space filled with floating chunks of metal and rock. These were the remains of ships that had been destroyed here over the centuries. Some pieces were as big as buildings. Others were tiny fragments that sparkled in the starlight. "There it is," said Tae-hyun, looking at the sensor readings. "The Kepler graveyard. Ships from dozens of different species have been destroyed here." "How many ships?" asked Hyejin. "At least 300, said Jinho. "Maybe more. The gravity fields move around, and sometimes they grab a ship and crush it before the crew can escape." Captain Hyunwoo looked out at the dangerous area of space they were about to enter. He had been here before many years ago, but the other ships didn't know that. They didn't know that the Persistence had detailed maps of every safe route through the graveyard. They didn't know that Jinho could navigate these dangers with his eyes closed. "All ships, this is General Kex," came a voice over the communication system. "We will begin with defensive testing. Each ship will be fired upon with simulated weapons. The goal is to see how long your shields and armor can last." "Understood," replied Hyunwoo. "We're ready when you are." "I doubt that," said Kex, "but we'll find out soon enough." The first test began with simulated weapons fire from 3 different directions. Bright beams of energy shot toward the Persistence from General Kex's ship, the Korgan heavy cruiser and the Xanthari science vessel. The watching alien ships expected to see the human vessel's primitive shields fail within seconds. Instead, something strange happened. The energy beams hit the Persistence, but instead of exploding or penetrating the hull, they seemed to disappear into the ship's surface. The metal plating glowed softly for a moment, then returned to its normal dull gray color. "What just happened?" asked an alien voice over the communication channel. It was Ambassador Zith from the Valtharian delegation. Captain Hyunwoo's voice came back calm and steady. "We absorbed your attack. Please continue the test." General Kex increased the power of his weapons. The energy beams got brighter and stronger. Still, the Persistence showed no damage. In fact, the ship seemed to be getting slightly brighter, as if it was storing the energy somehow. Dr. So-young sat at her engineering station, watching the readouts with satisfaction. "Adaptive ablative regeneration is working perfectly," she said to her crewmates. "The hull is learning from each hit." "Learning?" asked Tae-hyun. "The molecular structure of our outer plating changes based on what hits it," explained So-young. "Every time they fire an energy weapon, our hull becomes more resistant to that type of energy. Every time they hit us with a different weapon, we adapt to that too." On the watching ships, alien scientists were staring at their instruments in confusion. Their sensors showed impossible readings. The human ship's power levels were actually increasing as it was being attacked. "This is not possible," said General Kex over the communication system. "Our weapons should have destroyed your shields by now." "We don't use shields the way you do," replied Hyunwoo. "Our defense system is integrated into the hull itself." The Korgan ship fired a different type of weapon, a projectile that moved very fast and hit very hard. When it struck the Persistence, the hull dimpled inward for a moment, then pushed back out. The projectile bounced off and spun away into space. "The hull is elastic," whispered an alien scientist on one of the watching ships. "It's absorbing kinetic energy, too." Jinho looked at his navigation display and smiled. "We've been hit by every type of weapon in that test sequence before. About 600 years ago during the Martian defense crisis." "What happened then?" asked Hyejin. "A group of hostile aliens attacked the Mars colonies," said Jinho. "This ship was one of 3 that defended the planet. We took hits from energy weapons, kinetic weapons, plasma cannons, and something called molecular disruptors. And survived," added Minsu. "Not just survived," said So-young. "We learned. Every hit taught our systems how to defend against that type of attack. By the end of the battle, we were almost invulnerable to their weapons." The defensive test continued for another 20 minutes. The alien ships threw everything they had at the Persistence. Energy beams, projectiles, plasma bolts, even exotic weapons that most species had never seen before. The human ship absorbed it all. Finally, General Kex called a halt to the test. "Enough," he said. His voice sounded different now, less confident. "We will move on to the speed trial." The speed test would take place through the most dangerous part of the Kepler graveyard. Ships had to navigate through floating debris, avoid gravity wells that could crush them, and deal with unpredictable energy storms that appeared without warning. "The course is 300 kilometers through the center of the graveyard," announced General Kex. "Fastest time wins. Any ship that is destroyed, well, that ship loses." Some of the watching aliens laughed nervously. Ships died in the Kepler graveyard on a regular basis. Even experienced crews sometimes made mistakes that cost them everything. The Nexari ship Iron Fist went first. It was fast and heavily armored, with the most advanced navigation computer money could buy. General Kex pushed his ship hard, moving at maximum safe speed through the debris field. The Iron Fist sensors worked constantly, identifying threats and plotting safe routes. When a gravity well tried to grab the ship, powerful engines pulled it away. When debris threatened to hit the hull, point defense weapons shot the chunks of metal into smaller pieces. The ship made it through in 8 minutes and 43 seconds. It was a good time, and General Kex sounded proud when he announced it. The Korgan heavy cruiser went next. It was slower but even more heavily armored. The Korgan captain took a more careful approach, moving steadily through the graveyard and using the ship's massive bulk to smash through smaller debris. The Korgan ship finished in 9 minutes and 51 seconds. Not as fast as the Iron Fist, but still a respectable time for such a large vessel. The Zenthari science ship was next. It was smaller and more agile than the other two, with sensors that could detect dangers from very far away. The Zenthari captain used the ship's advanced computer systems to calculate the safest route through the graveyard. The science ship completed the course in 7 minutes and 32 seconds. The best time so far. And now, announced General Kex, the human vessel will attempt the course. There was excitement in his voice. The aliens expected the old human ship to move slowly and carefully through the graveyard. They thought it would take 15 or 20 minutes to complete the course, assuming it made it through at all. Captain Hyunwoo looked at his pilot. "Jinho, are you ready?" "I've been ready for 900 years, said Jinho quietly. The Persistence entered the graveyard at a speed that made the watching aliens gasp. Instead of slowing down to avoid debris, the ship moved faster. Instead of carefully plotting a safe route, it flew straight toward the most dangerous areas. "They're going to get themselves killed," said Ambassador Zith. But the human ship didn't get killed. It moved through the graveyard like the debris wasn't there. When a massive chunk of metal floated in its path, the ship slipped around it with centimeters to spare. When a gravity well tried to grab it, the ship used the gravity to speed up instead of fighting against it. "How are they doing that?" asked a Korgan captain on one of the watching ships. Jinho's hands moved over his controls like he was dancing. But he wasn't just relying on reflexes. His navigation system was showing him things that no other ship's computer could see. "Old friend is guiding us," he said to his crewmates. "Every piece of debris, every gravity anomaly, every energy storm, it's all mapped in the memory banks." "Old friend?" asked Taehyun. "The ship's navigation AI," explained Hyejin. "It's been learning and growing for 1,000 years. It doesn't just know where things are, it knows where they're going to be." The Persistence flew through sections of the graveyard that other ships avoided completely. It used gravity wells as slingshots to increase speed. It rode energy storms like ocean waves. It treated the most dangerous area of space in the sector like an empty highway. 4 minutes and 18 seconds, announced Jinho as they exited the graveyard. There was complete silence on the communication channels. The alien ships couldn't believe what they had just seen. The human vessel had not only survived the graveyard, it had moved through it faster than anyone thought possible. "That's impossible," said General Kex finally. "Our sensors show that you took a direct route through areas where no ship can survive." "We've been mapping this graveyard for 900 years, replied Captain Hyunwoo. "We know every safe passage, every dangerous zone, every trick for getting through quickly." 900 years? Said Ambassador Zith. "How old is your ship?" "Old enough to know better," said Hyunwoo. Dr. So-young looked at her instruments and saw something that made her smile. The other ship's sensors were trying to analyze the Persistence, but they couldn't get accurate readings. The ship's systems were too different from what they expected to find. "They're trying to scan us," she reported, "but their sensors don't know what to make of our technology." "What are they seeing?" asked Minsu. "Power readings that don't match any known reactor design. Hull composition that changes depending on what hits it. Navigation systems that predict the future. Communication arrays that work faster than light by reading quantum fluctuations." "No wonder they're confused," said Heejin. "We've had 1,000 years to develop technology they can't imagine." The final test was supposed to be the hardest one. General Kex had prepared a complex scenario that would challenge the problem-solving abilities of each ship and crew. It involved a diplomatic crisis between multiple alien species, with cultural conflicts, economic disputes, and the threat of war. This scenario has been designed to be unsolvable, announced General Kex. The best any ship can do is delay the outbreak of war for a few months. Captain Hyunwoo looked at the data as it appeared on his screens. The scenario was indeed complex, involving 47 different species with conflicting interests. Most computer systems would need hours just to analyze all the variables, but the Persistence had something no other ship possessed: the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 years of human diplomacy and cultural exchange. So Young, said the captain, access the historical databases. I want every successful negotiation, every peaceful resolution, every diplomatic breakthrough from the last millennium. Already on it, said So Young. The ship's memory banks have records of over 10,000 diplomatic situations. Captain Hyun-woo studied the diplomatic scenario on his screen. 47 different alien species were involved in a complex web of conflicts. Trade disputes, territorial claims, cultural misunderstandings, and old grudges had created a situation that seemed impossible to solve. The other ships had been working on the problem for over an hour. Their most advanced computers were running millions of calculations, trying to find a solution that would prevent war. So far, none of them had succeeded. Status report, said General Kex over the communication channel. How are you progressing with the scenario? The Korgan solution delays war for 3 months, reported the heavy cruiser's captain. The Zenthari approach might buy us 6 months of peace, said the science vessel. Our best projection gives us 8 months before conflict becomes inevitable, announced the Iron Fist. Then it was the human ship's turn. We have a solution, said Captain Hyunwoo. Simply, General Kex laughed. Captain, this scenario took our best minds 6 months to create. It includes cultural taboos from dozens of species, economic systems that are completely incompatible, and territorial disputes that go back centuries. You've had less than 30 minutes to study it. That's correct, said Hyunwoo. Would you like to hear our solution? There was a pause. The alien ships weren't expecting this kind of confidence from the humans. Very well, said General Kex. Present your solution. Hyunwoo looked at his crew. So Young had pulled up historical records from the ship's vast database. The information covered nearly 1,000 years of human diplomatic experience. Taehyun had cross-referenced cultural data from hundreds of first contact situations. Haijin had analyzed communication patterns to predict how different species would react to various proposals. The key to solving this scenario, began Hyunwoo, is understanding that it's not really about the current disputes. It's about underlying patterns of behavior that we've seen many times before. What patterns? Asked Ambassador Zith. Species A is acting aggressively because they're afraid Species B will cut off their trade routes. But Species B is only threatening to do that because they think Species A is planning to expand into their territory. Meanwhile, Species C is supporting Species A because they owe them money, and Species D is supporting Species B because they share similar religious beliefs. That's accurate, admitted General Kex. But knowing the pattern doesn't solve the problem. It does if you've seen the same pattern before, said Hyunwoo. In the year 2387, humans encountered a similar situation involving 3 species near the Rigel system. The solution was to create a neutral trading post managed by a fourth party. Dr. So Young looked at her historical records. In 2511, we dealt with religious conflicts between 2 species by establishing shared cultural exchange programs. In 2634, we resolved territorial disputes by creating joint exploration missions that gave both sides access to new resources. What you're describing, said Hyunwoo, is not a single problem but a combination of 7 different conflict types that humans have successfully resolved before. The solution is to address each type with proven methods, but in a specific order that takes into account how these species will react to each step. He began to outline his plan. First, establish neutral ground by bringing in 3 species that had no stake in the current conflicts, but were respected by all parties. Second, address the economic issues by creating new trade opportunities that would benefit everyone involved. Third, deal with the territorial disputes by proposing joint development projects. Fourth, resolve the cultural conflicts through carefully planned diplomatic exchanges. But the real key, said Hyunwoo, is timing. You have to implement these solutions in the right order, at the right speed, with the right people making the proposals. If Species A suggests something first, Species B will automatically reject it. But if Species F suggests the same thing, Species B might accept it. The alien ships were silent as they processed this information. Their computers began running new calculations based on the human approach. The computer projections look promising, said the Zenthari science ship captain. Your solution shows a 94% probability of lasting peace. How did you know all that? Asked General Kex. Experience, said Hyunwoo. This ship has been involved in diplomatic missions for nearly 1,000 years. We've seen these patterns before. We know what works and what doesn't. But the real surprise came when the aliens tried to analyze how the human ship had processed so much information so quickly. Their sensors detected something that should have been impossible. Captain Hyunwoo, said Ambassador Zith, our instruments are showing unusual readings from your ship's computer systems. The processing power required for your analysis should need a computer the size of a small moon. Dr. So-young smiled. Our computer isn't bigger than yours. It's older. What does that mean? Asked the Korgan captain. It means, said So-young, that while your computers are designed to be fast and powerful for a few years, ours has been learning and growing for 1,000 years. Jinho looked up from his navigation station. The ship's AI isn't just a computer program. It's a consciousness that has been continuously learning and evolving since the day this ship was built. We call it Old Friend, added He-jin. It's not just a tool we use. It's a member of our crew. A new voice came over the communication system. It was different from the human voices. Older somehow, with a quality that was hard to describe. Hello, said Old Friend. I apologize for not speaking earlier. I was busy analyzing the diplomatic scenario. The alien ships fell silent. An AI that could speak for itself was not unheard of, but an AI that was 1,000 years old was beyond anything they had encountered. You're the ship's computer? Asked General Kex. I am the ship, said Old Friend. I am its memory, its knowledge, its accumulated experience. These humans are my crew, my family, my partners. Together we have traveled the galaxy for a millennium. That's impossible, said the Zenthari captain. Computer systems don't last that long. They become obsolete, or they break down, or they're replaced with newer models. Not if you take care of them, said So-young. Not if you upgrade them continuously. Not if you treat them as living beings instead of tools. Taehyun looked at his instruments and saw something interesting. The other ships were trying to communicate with Old Friend directly, using standard computer protocols. But Old Friend wasn't responding to their attempts. They're trying to interface with you, he told Old Friend. I know, replied the AI. But their systems are too young, too simple. They don't speak my language. What language do you speak? Asked Ambassador Zith. The language of experience, said Old Friend. The language of memory. The language of understanding that comes only from living through 1,000 years of history. General Kex's voice came over the communication channel, and it sounded different than before. Less confident, more respectful. Captain Hyunwoo, I owe you an apology. We looked at your ship and saw something old and weak. We didn't understand what we were really seeing. What were you seeing? Asked Hyunwoo. Perfection, said General Kex. A ship that has been refined and improved for 1,000 years. A crew that has access to more knowledge and experience than any other ship in the galaxy. A partnership between humans and artificial intelligence that has lasted longer than most civilizations. We made a mistake, admitted Ambassador Zith. We confused age with weakness. We thought new meant better. Captain Hyunwoo looked around at his crew. They had heard this kind of talk before, from other species that had initially dismissed human capabilities. Thank you for the apology, he said. But we're not finished yet. What do you mean? Asked the Korgan captain. You asked us to demonstrate our ship's capabilities, said Hyunwoo. So far we've shown you our defensive systems, our navigation abilities, and our problem-solving skills. But we haven't shown you the most important thing, which is... Dr. So-young stood up and walked to one of the wall panels. She placed her hand on the surface and it began to glow softly. The glow spread across the entire panel, then to the next panel, then to the entire wall. Adaptability, she said. The ability to learn, to grow, to become better with each passing day. The glow continued to spread throughout the ship. Soon every surface was giving off a gentle light. The watching alien ships could see the persistence glowing like a star in the darkness of space. What you're seeing, said So-young, is a ship that has been continuously modified and improved for 1,000 years. Every system has been upgraded countless times. Every component has been refined to perfection. Every circuit has been optimized for maximum efficiency. But most importantly, added old friend, every experience has been remembered, analyzed, and incorporated into our knowledge base. We are not just old. We are experienced. We are not just functional. We are perfected. The alien ships watched in amazement as the human vessel demonstrated capabilities they had never imagined possible. The glow from the Persistence slowly faded, but its impact on the watching alien ships did not. For several minutes, no one spoke on any of the communication channels. The demonstration had shown them something they never expected to see, a level of technological sophistication that appeared simple on the surface but was actually more advanced than anything they possessed. General, Kex was the first to break the silence. Captain Hyunwoo, he said, his voice much quieter than before. I formally apologize for my behavior at the trade summit. I looked at your ship and saw primitiveness. I was completely wrong. We all were, added Ambassador Zith. Your vessel isn't old and weak. It's refined beyond our comprehension. Other voices joined in from the watching ships. Captains and diplomats who had been laughing at the humans just hours before were now expressing amazement and respect. How long has your ship been in continuous operation? Asked the Zenthari science ship captain. 1,047 years, replied Captain Hyunwoo. She was built during Earth's first major expansion into deep space. And she's never been replaced or retired? Never, said Dr. So-young. Every few decades we upgrade her systems and improve her capabilities. But the core of the ship, her basic structure and her AI consciousness has been growing and learning for over a millennium. Old friend's voice joined the conversation. I have memories of the first human colonies, the first contact with alien species, the first trade agreements, the first diplomatic missions. Every experience has made me wiser. Every challenge has made me stronger. A new voice came over the communication system. It was Captain Korthak from one of the massive Korgan dreadnoughts that had been watching the demonstration. In all my years of service, said Korthak, I have never seen anything like this. My ship is only 5 years old, but it's already scheduled for replacement next year. We build them big and strong, but we replace them constantly. Why? Asked Jinho. Because technology advances so quickly, replied Korthak. By the time a ship is 10 years old, it's obsolete. The computers are too slow, the weapons are outdated, the shields are weak compared to newer models. That's the difference between us, said So-young. You replace your ships when they become outdated. We update our ship so it never becomes outdated. Dr. Velmara from the Veltharian crystal ship Crystal Dawn spoke next. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of her species. Dr. So-young, our scientists would very much like to study your engineering principles. We could offer you access to our crystal matrix technology in exchange. So-young looked at Captain Hyunwoo, who shook his head slightly. Thank you for the generous offer, said So-young, but we must decline. Our ship has survived this long precisely because we've learned to be very careful about integrating alien technology. But surely some knowledge exchange would benefit both our species, pressed Dr. Velmara. Perhaps, said Hyunwoo, but the Persistence has taught us that the most advanced technology is often the kind that doesn't need constant upgrading or replacement. Tae-hyun looked up from his cultural analysis display. We've learned that every species in the galaxy goes through the same pattern. They develop new technology rapidly, build bigger and more powerful ships, then replace everything every few years when something better comes along. But humans chose a different path, added Hyejin. Instead of building new ships, we perfected one ship. Instead of replacing old systems, we improved them. Instead of starting over, we kept growing. The communication channels became busy as alien ships began talking to each other. The humans could hear fragments of conversations in dozens of different languages. Some species were amazed. Others were skeptical. A few seemed frightened by the implications. Captain Hyunwoo, said General Kex, may I ask you a direct question? Of course. How many ships like yours does humanity have? There was a pause before Hyunwoo answered. Define like ours. Ships that are over 1,000 years old and still in active service. 17, said Hyunwoo. The communication channels fell silent again. 17 ships, each with 1,000 years of experience and continuous improvement. It represented a level of technological maturity that no other species had achieved. 17,000-year-old ships, repeated Ambassador Zith slowly, each one with an AI consciousness that has been learning and growing for a millennium. Each one with systems that have been refined to perfection. Each one, added Old Friend, with a complete record of human exploration, diplomacy, and scientific discovery. We are not just ships. We are libraries. We are archives. We are the accumulated wisdom of our species. Captain Korthak's voice carried a note of something like awe. No wonder humanity has been so successful in galactic politics. You don't just have advanced technology. You have institutional memory. What do you mean? Asked the Zenthari captain. Think about it, said Korthak. When the Korgans negotiate a trade agreement, we rely on diplomats who might have a few decades of experience. When humans negotiate, they can draw on 1,000 years of successful negotiations. Dr. So-Young nodded, even though the other ships couldn't see her. Every mistake we've ever made is in our databases. Every successful strategy is recorded and analyzed. Every cultural misunderstanding has been studied and documented. We don't just learn from our own experiences, said Tai Hyun. We learn from the experiences of every human crew that has ever served on ships like this one. The scope of what they were describing began to sink in among the alien observers. This wasn't just about one old ship. It was about an entire approach to technology and knowledge that was fundamentally different from what other species practiced. Captain Hyun-woo, said Dr. Velmara, I think I'm beginning to understand why humanity has been so effective at resolving interspecies conflicts. Oh? Said Hyun-woo. You don't just have experience with current political situations. You have experience with every type of political situation that has ever occurred. That's correct, said Old Friend. In my memory banks, I have records of over 50,000 first contact situations, more than 100,000 trade negotiations, and nearly 500,000 diplomatic interactions of various types. And you remember all of them? Asked General Kex. All of them, confirmed Old Friend. Every successful strategy, every failed approach, every cultural nuance that made the difference between peace and war. Minsu looked up from his security console. We're receiving formal requests for meetings from over 30 different species. They want to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. What kinds of meetings? Asked Hyunwoo. Trade partnerships, defense agreements, cultural exchange programs, scientific cooperation treaties. Pretty much everything. Hyojin checked her communication logs. I'm also getting requests for consultations on diplomatic situations. 3 species want us to mediate territorial disputes. 2 others are asking for help with trade negotiations. Captain Hyunwoo looked around at his crew. They had expected this kind of response, but it was still impressive to see how quickly word was spreading. What should we tell them? Asked Hyojin. Tell them we'll consider each request carefully, said Hyunwoo. But remind them that we're here for the trade summit first. As the alien ships began to disperse from the demonstration area, the communication channels filled with new kinds of conversations. Instead of jokes about primitive human technology, the aliens were discussing partnership opportunities and requesting copies of human diplomatic protocols. The Persistence turned toward Nexus Prime, ready to return to the trade summit. But everything had changed. The humans were no longer seen as minor players trying to compete with major galactic powers. They were now recognized as the representatives of the galaxy's most experienced spacefaring civilization. You know, said Jin Ho as he piloted the ship back toward the station. This happens every time we go somewhere new. What happens? Asked Tae-hyun. People look at our ship and think we're primitive. Then we show them what experience really means. Then they want to be our friends. Dr. So-young ran her hand along one of the glowing wall panels. It's not just about showing off, she said. It's about teaching other species that there's more than one way to advance technologically. Most species focus on building bigger, faster, more powerful ships, said Minsu. They think that's what advancement means. But real advancement, said Hyejin, means building something that lasts, something that gets better with time instead of becoming obsolete. Captain Hyunwoo watched Nexus Prime grow larger in the view screen as they approached the station. The galaxy is full of species that can build amazing things, he said. But very few have learned how to make things that endure. That's what makes us different, said Old Friend. Not our technology, but our philosophy. We don't build things to be replaced. We build things to grow. As the Persistence docked at Nexus Prime, Captain Hyunwoo could see aliens waiting for them at the docking bay. Diplomats, scientists, traders, and military officers from dozens of different species had come to greet them personally. "Ready to get back to work?" he asked his crew. "Always," they replied. The crew of the 1,000-year-old ship prepared to leave their vessel and return to the trade summit. But now they went as respected partners rather than curiosities.